basically, there's a big infrastructure problem in the United States. I like this picture. There's a giant hole in the picture, and the mayor of Chicago is looking into the hole. I'm really wondering what's in the hole, because everybody seems to be looking down there. So this is the mission of the trust. And the basic thing that you really want to know about the mission of the trust, and these slides will be on the website, is that we were designed to create alternative financing mechanisms to finance infrastructure projects. So traditionally, most everything that's done in the city is done using a bond. And the idea here was, can we do some projects where instead of using a bond, we can use privately placed dollars to do those projects, and perhaps make those projects what a finance person would call off-balance sheet, off-credit, so that they don't count against the city's credit allocations, and the city would be able to have stronger credit. So these are some of the benefits. One of them is essentially to create jobs. And many of you here are involved with trades, or all of you here are involved somehow with trades. There is a very specific benefit to trades jobs as a result of doing infrastructure projects, as you all know. For the gentleman who asked about how do you get more work, there are 2 intake sessions going on right now that are still left, one on May 21st and one on June 6th, for the purpose of 60 city buildings that will be retrofitting for energy purposes. And I've given the information about that to your association, so if you're interested in taking a look at that or going to one of the intake sessions, you certainly can. And we'll constantly be publicizing activities like this as we go forward with more projects. The model on the chart on the screen right now is our operating model. Basically, our goal is to do projects that have a return on investment. That's absolutely critical. The trust has to be a self-sustaining organization, and the objective is, with the money that we make from the projects that do have a return on investment, to attempt to do projects that don't have a return on investment. So, for example, if we're doing energy retrofits of buildings or facilities, we'd like to take the money that we make as a result of saving energy and use that money to, say, replace a bridge where there would be no return on investment because there's no toll on that bridge. So these are some of our functions. The main one that I mentioned was attract private capital to infrastructure projects. I've been in my job now for 14 months. When I started, we had no projects. At this point, we have actually over $1 billion worth of projects in our pipeline. So I think that's pretty good in 14 months time frame, and we have a lot of other projects that are on the drawing boards that hopefully will become real projects. So this chart shows our progress to date. We've closed our first transaction. It's a retrofit of 60 city buildings. It's in process. It was very interesting to me because when we finished the financing, a lot of people were saying congratulations, and I was kind of a little bit perplexed because we're just beginning to start construction. Over the course of the next year, we'll be finishing construction. At that point, I will be very happy about the project where we'll have retrofitted 60 city buildings. We are increasingly attracting private sector ideas. For those of you who haven't been to our website, we have a contracting manual on the website. And the contracting manual offers 3 methodologies for interacting with the trust. The first is the traditional methodology that you're used to, which involves RFIs, RFQs, RFPs. But the second is what we call an unsolicited proposal. And an unsolicited proposal is where you can submit a proposal to us for something that we weren't looking for. So right now, we're doing a project to retrofit all 141 pools in the city of Chicago, which are actually run by schools and parks. And I never thought about retrofitting pools. I never really understood what was behind the mechanical room of a pool. And nobody else in the city was thinking about how could we retrofit pools. But there's a company in the United States that was going around the country retrofitting pools for the YMCA. And they saw that we had this unsolicited proposal process, so they submitted one to retrofit all the pools in Chicago. Now, if you submit an unsolicited proposal, you're automatically a finalist for that proposal. But we then go to an open bid process, and we give 30 days for other companies to come in and submit proposals. 2 other major corporate construction firms came in and submitted proposals. We actually just closed this past Friday, and now the bid process, and now we're in the process of evaluating which of those 3 companies is going to get the contract. But we have this unsolicited bid proposal process. I strongly suggest looking at the contracting manual on the Trust website and seeing if there's something you're doing that might warrant submitting an unsolicited bid proposal. We are looking at retrofitting all of the streetlights in the city of Chicago. There's about 400,000 of them. It will be the largest streetlight retrofit project ever done. Talked about the aquatic centers. We're also looking at what's called a commercial PACE program, Property Assessed Clean Energy. We're looking at creating a program in the next couple of months where the ability to retrofit a building for energy purposes can get put on the property tax assessment and then paid back through the property tax assessment mechanism. This is very important because building owners tend to flip their buildings in 3 to 5 years, and so there's a tendency not to do energy retrofit financing because it's not included in what gets sold. So this enables that financing to go with the building. And we're looking at a very large project that will potentially be over $500 million in financing for this project. We're also at the moment looking at upgrading wireless in the subways from 2G to 4G, and we're looking at installing compressed natural gas throughout the city. Currently, a gas gallon equivalent of compressed natural gas is about $1.50 less per gallon at the pump than regular gasoline, so that would be very important. And we are looking at a number of different property-related projects for the purposes of renovating them. So on the slides here, which again you'll be able to look at on the website, this first slide is about the municipal buildings transaction, and the idea is to dramatically increase energy efficiency in these buildings. And again, it's just the beginning of retrofitting city buildings. There's 60 of them in this case going forward with, including some iconic buildings like City Hall and Cultural Center. We did an energy services agreement in order to do this transaction. It's the first time that the city of Chicago has done an energy services agreement, and it's only the second time in the history of doing ESAs that a tax-exempt agreement has been done anywhere. So this was a tax-exempt energy services agreement, and it's the first time that a non-bond activity was done in order to finance a project in the city. And it was a bit difficult to do because it was the first time. It was off credit and off balance sheet, which was very important from the city's perspective because it gives us the ability to do many, many more projects than we would ordinarily do if we were constrained by the bonding process. This chart is on the lighting project. Lighting, there's 2 charts here, one that just talks about the number of lights in the city, and the second one that talks about street lights as a platform. Many of you who are electrical engineers know better than me that a street light is a point where electric comes to, and there's 400,000 of those points in the city. And basically there are a lot of other things that we can do with a light beyond just using it for the purposes of lighting. So it's possible now to put a GPS chip in every light. It's possible to allow, for example, the police to triangulate somebody's location between 3 lights for the purposes of a crime is being committed to help to stop that crime. There's all kinds of illumination issues that can occur. For example, you can raise and lower the lighting depending upon the needs of a particular event or a particular issue on that street. You can do car charging. You can provide connectivity. We're looking at mesh networking for all the lighting to put a better cellular network throughout the entire city. So there's a lot of things that we can do related to lighting. We talked about the pool efficiency project. It's a very exciting project. We're looking at actually renovating all 141 pools in the city. And then the subway system project. So that's the end of the slideshow. I really wanted to be able to answer questions, and somebody wanted to know about, the gentleman over there, about the sale of public assets. So the trust is not in the business of selling public assets. It's up to the elected officials of the city of Chicago to decide what happens to public assets. The trust job is to do financing of projects to make those assets better. And that's essentially what our mission is. And we're not in the business of selling public assets. We don't own any public assets. And we are in the business of financing public assets. When you do an off-balance sheet, off-credit transaction, there is the ability for the asset to change ownership hands to the trust for the period of time, the term of the financing. And then at the end of the term of the financing, that asset reverts back to the city. And that's what the transfer of the asset in that particular case is what enables the transaction to be off credit, off balance sheet. But the ultimate ownership of the asset after the term of the financing is the city. The city will own that asset. So I don't personally view that as a particularly big issue. If the trust were to go out of business tomorrow, the city would own anything that the trust had. Therefore, it's not a particular risk from my perspective at any rate. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, every project that we do, we have to go to the city council to get an ordinance for that particular project depending upon the disposition of assets. So the city council gets the opportunity to decide whether or not we are following a correct path for that particular asset. I don't know, is that an adequate answer, or is there another issue you'd like to discuss? Okay. Anybody else with a question? Yes, sir. No, we're trying to privately place for our funds. So essentially, there's many methodologies that we can use to raise funds. In some cases, they come from the companies internally financing. So there are a number of multinational construction firms, for example, that have captive financing. And I mean, I don't really, not to be flippant, but I don't care how they provide the money to us. In some cases, they may go out to do a bond on the back end, which we don't have visibility into. In other cases, they may be issuing commercial paper or something. But in a number of cases, from an energy standpoint, there are a significant number of private equity funds that have been created to do energy financing at this point. Additionally, and the folks from Ulico are here, and in addition, there are a significant number of pension funds that have now begun investing in these types of activities. So there is a significant range of private capital that's available, although at different rates and at different terms. The trust has to do projects that have a return on investment. The objective is for the city to not have to finance projects that we are doing on behalf of the city. So we have to be able to do significant analytical work to ensure that our projects have a payback. But we're attempting to do that with the use of private financing. It gets to be a balancing act because frequently the public finance markets and bonds can provide a lower cost of capital pertaining to the specific bond. But typically what happens is that the overall cost of capital for the project is much more than just simply the rate on the bond. And very rarely is, in past projects, was the city calculating the overall rate of capital for the entire project. So sort of a value engineering approach. Whereas we're now calculating the rate of capital for the entire project, which makes privately placed capital much more efficient and comparable to the true cost of capital for a city project. So privately placed capital, which can be off credit, off balance sheet, is the way to go for some projects. Not for all projects, because we do have to have a return. So for a project that required a typical public-private partnership that required an availability payment, where you might have to put a toll, let's say, on a particular property, but where we don't want to put a toll, those would not be appropriate projects for us. So not every project is an appropriate project. Did I hit the heart of the matter? Someone else? Yeah.
How's it going with the divvy bikes?
It's not one of my projects. Have you ever ridden on a divvy bike?
No, not yet.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, I enjoy doing it, and I wonder why you don't have to wear a helmet, but other than that, they seem like a pretty good project. It's not a trust project, but it seems like the project is going very well. Sir?
How long do the paybacks take?
Well, payback is really a function of what the financing companies are willing to do. Right now, for an energy project, it appears that 10 to 15 years is the typical payback that's acceptable to, say, a bulge bracket bank. We are trying to do the PACE program, as I mentioned. And in the PACE program, we're hoping that we can get terms that range up to 20 to 25 years, which would give us the ability to have a significantly greater number of projects. And I think I was talking to some folks from the carpenters earlier, and we were talking about building envelopes. If we can get to that 20 to 25 year range in terms of financing, we would definitely be able to do more building envelope related work, because that work frequently has a lower payback than some of the other work, like replacing a boiler or adjusting the timing on a boiler. Did I answer your question? Sir.
For the street light project, how much of that will be solar?
Interesting question. I don't know. Solar has been a big disappointment for me in terms of trust activities. We actually have ULICO as a partner for the purposes of doing solar activities, but it's incredibly difficult to get to grid parity for solar in the Chicago region because our energy costs are so cheap. So even though you may have read in the paper the other day that our energy costs are going up compared to everywhere else in the country, we actually have cheap energy. And as a result, we're not able to get to grid parity the way they are in other parts of the country. Now, in some parts of the country, solar is much more heavily subsidized. So, but here, because of our cheap cost of energy, we actually can't get solar to be, even with subsidy, to be equal to in price of the way we get energy delivered at the moment. Now, for the street lights, we are going to run some experiments to see what the impact of solar is specifically for the street lights and whether that's a good idea here. And that may not have grid parity as a particularly big issue for the street lights, but solar in general has been a bit disappointing because we just can't get the grid parity. We have a lot of ways we can use solar in the city. For the pools project, we are looking at solar heating for the pools. So there's discrete activities where solar works, but just more broadly as a power source. And we are looking at it as a discrete activity for the street lights. That somebody else?
Is there any plans to have the utility companies, Edison, gas companies,
Well, we have started talking to the utility companies. For PACE in particular, right now, it's not legal to do residential PACE in the state of Illinois. And residential PACE nationwide is not allowed because the FHA has prohibited it at the moment. So the utility companies often subsidize a lot more residential activity than they do commercial or municipal activity. And so the trust will not be working with the utility companies so much for that purpose. However, we are talking to the utility companies in terms of a number of the projects we're doing to see in particular if there are rebates available to help subsidize some of these projects. I think it's, with the utility companies like many other areas, it's a function of them being aware that the trust exists, getting used to the fact that we exist, and thinking of us in advance when they are making their plans for how they're going to do rebates, when they're going to do rebates, and so on. But we are looking, for example, for streetlights to see if there would be rebates available from the utility companies for that purpose. Did I answer your doubt? Someone else? Sir?
Steve, just to reiterate what you're saying about the building envelope. Energy controls contracting is a way to create jobs. Typically, within this energy controls contracting, we're seeing the bigger national companies like Johnson Controls, Air Westwood, Morris, Honeywell come in and, evaluating the mechanical electrical biggest energy loss, energy savings is capitalized for building envelope. One example is Empire State Building, $13.2 million retrofit, air filtration, windows replaced for $4.2 million payback per year. So you decide the math on that's a 3-year payback. So we asked that the infrastructure trust, the board, and the advisory committee look outside the box just to mechanical electrical plumbing and see the savings that we capitalize by looking at building envelopes around the world. It's all about thermal comfort. We're seeing a lot of assisted living. We're seeing a lot now with medical facilities. It's got to build the right, but you got to make sure they're nice and tight. So that's not what you're doing, but we'd like to be part of that input to try and enhance the energy savings. And it's sure it's an environmental sustainability, but it's also an economic engine.
So just to be clear from my perspective, I am not a construction guy, although I have built a couple of buildings under fire. But that is not where my expertise lays. But we at the Trust are doing projects. And the path that we've taken at this point is, as people have come into us with innovative technologies, we've tried to marry those technologies to the folks that are the project management for the projects that we're doing or contemplating, so that they could see if those technologies will work in their projects. So I have an open invitation to anybody that would like to talk to us to please feel free to come and talk to us. If you're interested in participating in projects, we will be happy to make sure that you get to the project managers over time that are responsible for engaging companies to do those projects, who are in turn working for us. Or if you have a technology or capability that we need to know more about, then we certainly would like to learn about that, because we're beginning to catalog those things now and make sure that every aspect of a renovation or a retrofit is accounted for as we do these projects. We want the projects that we're doing to be as big and as expensive as they possibly can, principally because the project development cost for our projects is pretty much fixed. If we do a $10 million project, it costs $1 million to do that project. If we do $100 million to do a project, it costs $1 million to do that project. If we do a $1 billion project, it costs $1 million to do that project. So basically, given that our project development costs are pretty much fixed, we should be trying to do as big a project as we possibly can. For the PACE project, by the way, there are national calculations for the number of jobs that PACE creates. For the size program that we're contemplating here, we would be creating 2,000 jobs just for that program, trades jobs, just for that program alone. So there are some pretty impactful programs that we're contemplating, but I invite you, if you want to make us more knowledgeable about a particular aspect of what you do, please, we are more than happy to hear about that. Somebody else? Anybody else? Is there anything oh, sorry. Davis-Bacon? We, the Trust, are required to abide by Davis-Bacon legislation. I don't think there's anything to comment about. We abide by Davis-Bacon legislation, which, not that we wouldn't anyway, but we do. Sorry. Right. Did I not answer the...
It's all this stuff is covered under the city project labor agreement.
Okay, I mean, follow all the... You're asking if we use union labor, basically? Is that what I don't think I would come here if we didn't. There's a lot of big guys in the room. I like it as special forces, but you know, after a while you kind of forget it. I mean, so I don't know. Are we? That's probably a good way to wrap it up, right?